So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you tonight. We've got a great lineup. Tim Johnson has been in auction property for a long time. He taught me pretty much everything that I've learned about auction properties. And it's without further ado that I would like to move across to Tim and to ask him. The topic tonight that we'll be talking about on Let's Talk Property is auction properties and how to make the most of the opportunities available. I think at the end of the day, we all understand that there's great opportunities in auction property, but most of us know that we should be buying auction, we should be buying pre-auction, we should be buying PRPs or properties in possession. There's a lot of lingo, a lot of jargon, but at the end of the day, not a lot of people are doing it. You know, it's only the really sophisticated investors that are getting out there. And what Tim and I are hoping to do tonight is to unravel and to answer some of those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Tim Johnson. Tim is part of Gavel & Co. And what I basically want to do, you can see the logo there for Tim, so let me just move across quickly. I want to bring him up on the screen so we can see what Tim looks like. Tim, welcome. Great to have you online tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. I just want to make sure that we've got the screens right here. Just give me 2 seconds. I'll move across to screen. Tim, thanks. It's awesome to have you online tonight. For those of you that haven't used a webinar before, just to let you know, the video comes through a little bit slowly, but we will be recording it, and we'll also be recording an audio version, which will probably be easier for everyone to see. I can see now Tim is up on the screen, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Tim and say, Tim, tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, who is Tim Johnson and where do you come from?
Well, I suppose in business, I'd have to say that I'm an opportunist with an entrepreneurial spirit. A lot of guys out there that don't enjoy that corporate environment, and that's certainly where I fit in. But I've definitely got a desire to challenge the status quo and do things a bit different and be unique. And I started out quite young in the business world. At the age of about 21, launched an advertising agency, and that really exposed a lot of different industries, a lot of different challenges, a lot of different strategies that had to be implemented in some pretty interesting times. And through that, you're always trying to find ways to constantly improve and be unique, but looking out for opportunities, and that's where the entrepreneurial spirit comes, but I suppose more so being an opportunist. And this is obviously similar to that of being a property investor. It just so happened that we got involved a lot in destination branding, and I was involved in marketing and strategizing a number of Gulf estates, property developments, sectional title developments, hotels, and the like. And that's where my interest in property really began.
Fantastic. And just before I move on to the next question, I forgot to mention it. For those of you that haven't used a webinar, or those of you who have, please fire away. Ask us questions. I've got my other computer open here. I can read the questions as they come through. Tim and I would love to interact. There's a lot of people online tonight, which is fantastic. Ask us the questions rather than waiting to the end, and I'll be able to interact with Tim through the questions. So thanks for that, Tim. Let's move on to the second one, and really the reason we're all here tonight. How did you get into auctions? What was it that you liked about auctions, and why are you there?
Well, as I said before, it really comes down to opportunity and looking for opportunities. I decided to move back to my hometown. I'd been in Joburg for 8 years. It had a really great time up there, and things have been going quite well. But I made a lifestyle decision to move away and to try and find new challenges, new opportunities that might appear. And it was a bit of a risk, I suppose, but at the end of the day, I was approached, as timing would have it, by Peter Harris, the MD of an auction company in the area, and he had been quite pivotal in bringing to the bank's attention the problems associated with sheriff auctions, the challenges that lay in repossessing properties, and came up with a number of interesting strategic new ways of doing things. And he approached me at the time to help him take his business to the next level. With my background in property in a different form, it's something that really interested me. And we've spent the last couple of years really fine-tuning our knowledge for the industry. And since that day, we've opened up premises around the country, and things have been going really well. So it was a bit of opportunity, but it's a fantastic industry, and it's a very exciting industry. It's a very dynamic industry, and that's something that really appealed to me at the time.
Quick question here, Tim, from Joff van Reenen. Joff has asked, how long have you actively been involved in real estate as a professional auctioneer? And also if you could give us a bit of feedback from Peter's perspective, because I know he's been in the game a long time as well.
Well, look, Peter's been around in various forms in property for over 30 years as a franchisor for Pam Golding and also then independently himself. I've been involved in different forms in the property game for about 5 to 6 years. I myself am not an auctioneer. Obviously, those are the guys that we've employed. We have a number of auctioneers that work for us, and obviously Peter Harris is an auctioneer. But in terms of this auction game, that's something that's happened over the last couple of years for myself. But Pete, as I've said, is a bit of a mentor for me, and he's been around for a long time.
Thanks for that. Another question from John Straub. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, but he said, could you give some info on debt reviews? I don't know if you're going to bring that up later, if you want to just park that for a while, or if you're happy to answer it now.
We can talk about it now. I mean, it's something that I'm sure will come up later as well. But obviously, that comes down to clients that are under financial pressure. And what a lot of people don't realize is that when they get into these situations where they're under stress, a lot of the time they don't look for these types of opportunities. Obviously, going into debt review means that you communicate with the debt counselor, and they essentially try and combine all of your debts into a manageable monthly situation that allows you to keep your creditors at bay. It's a good way to go about doing things, but sometimes it can be quite a short-term solution to sometimes a bigger problem, particularly if you've got high-priced, high-ticket items such as property, vehicles, that kind of thing. But it is a solution, and it is something that we do encourage our clients at times to pursue.
Okay. Another question here from John, and I will after this I will get into some of the questions I've got, and we can hold on with these for a little bit. But another question John asked: how long can insolvent people hold out before the banks can legally repossess? I gather this is a bit of an issue for the banks who can't sell on repos.
Well, it's an interesting one. Sometimes what will happen is that a legal action will be taken against the client, by the plaintiff being the bank or another financial institution generally. And often what happens is that clients then during this period, as they head towards sale and execution, sometimes even post sale and execution, they would declare themselves insolvent, or if it's an individual, they would sequestrate themselves. This is another way that people can avoid the sheriff's auction and that SIE process. But inevitably what will happen is for those of you that may maybe not know this process, a trustee will be appointed, and at that point they will then have control over that person's assets. Everything will then be auctioned off accordingly, and the money that's raised from that will be used to pay off the debtors. But it really is a sort of short-term solution, and at the end of the day, the banks and the those creditors, the debtors, are always going to get their money out of that.
Okay, fantastic. There's a couple more questions here, but I want to get into it basically. So just a question here: what do you think is happening in the SA market at the moment, and where do you see us going in property in general in South Africa? To the questions that are coming through, I will put them in, but just in the right sections, basically.
Yeah, look, I mean, a lot of people that are interested in property and investment in this country will know that it's been a very tough, 3 to 4 years after what can only be said is a boom period that a lot of South Africa, felt. At the moment, I think quite an interesting sort of statistic that has come out is the banks have agreed through various bits of research that have been conducted, and that in 2011, almost 40% of all property sales in South Africa will be distressed sales, and this is an increase from last year, where it was about 15%. So, this tells us that there's still a lag effect, and I think people are still experiencing a lot of challenges in keeping up their bond payments. There's another statistic that says that almost 2 million, or in that region of 2 million people in South Africa that have bonds are at least 2 to 3 months in arrears on their bond payments. So, if you look at these sorts of situations, you can see that the market is still in a state of flux. And I don't see there being a huge change in the immediate future. But obviously, we remain positive about what will happen in the next 12 to 18 months. But it's been tough, and the sales figures have increased. It did improve towards the last quarter of 2010, and there was a lot more activity as far as construction. But generally, it's still been quite stressed.
And Tim, a quick question there, just to confirm those numbers. You said 2 million people are behind on payments. Did I hear you right there?
That's correct. Look, Scott, I mean, there's if you chat to different banks, you'll get slightly different answers. And the banks don't like to really, make these sorts of figures known, because obviously it's obviously a tough situation which they're trying to deal with, and this can really be seen in the fact that in the last 3 years, banks have set up what they would call their quick sell, fast sell, assist programs to assist clients that are in this position. And this has become, some banks are more advanced than others as far as these programs are concerned. But it was a big enough problem for them to do this. And I think those numbers are pretty fair. And obviously the specifics we'll have to wait and see. But from our experience in the industry, it's definitely tough out there.
And just a quick one so that I understand, 2 million people, do you have any idea out of how many people that actually is?
Scott, I don't have those figures with me. Obviously, it's a considerable number. We've got well over 45 to 48 million people in the country. I mean, I would say maybe, I'm guessing here, but I don't know, somewhere in the region of between 8 and 12, million bond holders potentially, and on various means. A bondholder doesn't necessarily mean a 1 million rand bondholder. There's a lot of clients out there that have got bonds, in the region of 100 to 200,000 rand, and it's these guys that have also been hit quite hard by interest rates and the general economic recession.
Okay, fantastic. Well, let me move on here. In terms of the auction market, I mean, you have started to talk about it already, but I mean, what is happening? Just explain to us a little bit about what's happened sort of over the last 18 months, where we are and sort of where you see it going, basically.
Well, I think, auctioning has definitely in the recent times become quite a buzzword. It wasn't something that traditionally had been accepted as a acceptable way of selling property in South Africa. In recent times, through the efforts of some of our key players and some of the larger auction firms, it's definitely hit mainstream as a good way to get offers. Overseas, in places like Australia and the UK, it's very acceptable. In fact, in Australia, auctioning is the primary form of property sales. But I think in South Africa and where we are right now, particularly in generally a distressed market, it provides sellers with an opportunity to get an offer. And I think one of the challenges that face the sellers in this situation is that, and I hate to generalize, but from an estate agency point of view, a lot of the estate agents, they struggle with the idea of communicating with their clients as far as realistic prices, and they often don't bring offers to the table. Holding an auction means that we will get an offer. We work towards getting an offer, and we get an offer, and obviously depending on the terms of the auction, that'll either be accepted or not. But it's definitely become a way where, as we say in the game, we set a time and a date for you to sell your property, and that's something that is catching on, and it's something that a lot of people are considering more carefully.
Okay, fantastic. And I mean, just in terms of, let's get on to the nitty gritty, which everyone here is asking about. Lebokang has asked a question: how does one get information about the auction houses? Because it seems like only agents get hold of information. I mean, at your understanding of the market and how it's working, how does one get access to the opportunities? Where to from here if I'm looking to get a property?
Look, there are a number of avenues for this, and a number of the banks do have their own websites where they keep a lot of their distressed properties, or PRPs, which are properties in possession. And there are obviously a lot of auction houses that also deal in this. But the key is to search for reputable auctioneers. And I'm obviously going to punt the auction game, but it's to look for reputable auctioneers. They are out there. It's a lot of the times the banks have even resorted to uploading their properties on various other property portals. So they're out there, and you just need to keep your ear to the ground. But obviously, some of the banks have got different programs. I mean, the likes of First National Bank have got what they call Quick Sell, and they've got a website that corresponds to that. You got guys like Nedbank with Nedbank Assist, and so on.
No, fantastic. And I would like to just show something quickly to Lebogang as well. It's something that we actually did, and you should be able to see it's coming up on your screen now. This is actually, we've been doing a number of presentations around the country, and actually did the very first one with Tim in December in Johannesburg. This is just a detail of the process flow, and I'm not going to go into it in detail now. Lebogang and others, should you want it, I'll be able to make this available to you. But the bottom line is there's actually 5 different stages in this process, and it very much depends on what part of the process it's in as to whether there's estate agents or auctioneers involved. You'll see here, when it's in this distressed seller process, the agents are involved and they get sole mandates. But in these yellow sections, and also in the sheriff, it's where the auctioneers are involved. So in terms of what's actually happening, hopefully that gives you a little bit more of an indication. So, but as I said, the intention is not to go into that tonight. The intention is to try and pick Tim's brain. So I mean, in terms of the best opportunities, Tim, from what you've seen and where you're going, I mean, tell us a little bit about the FNB No Reserve auction. There's actually a question here from Joff van Rienen. He said, you guys recently conducted an auction for FNB home loans in Johannesburg. It was advertised as no reserve, but I signed a purchase agreement that said subject to confirmation. Don't understand what is the difference. Maybe you want to tell us a little about no reserve, and I mean, I understand what happened with Joff, but if you could just explain it for the others.
No problem, Scott. Look, the FNB No Reserve auction was something that we went and presented to the bank to try and assist them with their PRP book. They've probably got one of the smallest PRP books out of the banks, but it's still considerable and still something that they were looking to get rid of. A lot of the properties, the average length of time that those properties had been on the books was about 13 months as a PRP. And obviously, if you consider the amount of time that the properties may have been in the market prior to that, prior to sale and execution, these properties had been there for a while. So we came up with the idea of no reserve, which hadn't been done before. And to answer the question specifically, there were no conditions. The highest offer that was received on the closing date, which was on the 20th of December 2010, was accepted. So there were no conditions to it. The only condition was that at any time during the auction, the bank could accept an offer, but that was to their discretion. But they were in no way allowed to reject an offer at the end, and this resulted in a lot of people getting a lot of great deals. So, to that effect, I'm not too sure specifically what happened there, but I mean, that's the case.
Well, look, Tim, I mean, my understanding from the whole process was it started in 1 November 2010, and the bank basically gave you guys and the bank 7 weeks to sell the property. Now, when Joff signed the agreement and it was subject to confirmation, it was because obviously what he had put down was it was not high enough for the bank to accept there and then. So it was subject to confirmation, and it depended whether a higher offer came in before the 20th of December, surely.
Yeah, Scott, I mean, obviously, in doing something as risky as this, we took 79 properties of the banks, and there was a total rand value of about 40 million rand in property. So in order to give ourselves the best opportunity to achieve the best price possible on the properties, we had decided to create a longer auction period, and that was from the 1st of November, as you said, to the 20th of December. In that period, there was a a sort of an event that was held at the First National Bank head office in Joburg, and that was a big auction that took place on the 27th of November. We also did on-site auctions at most of the properties, and all of this was done to get offers on the properties. So at any point along that time, the offers were there and they were available for the bank, and the bank was able to accept it. And that's really the process, because obviously what's happened in previous occasions with other auction houses and the banks is that they go and do a multiple auction, a large multiple auction on a specific day, and that's not going to guarantee you the best result. And obviously with something like a no reserve auction, that would have just opened us up to very low prices and without giving us an opportunity to market them adequately. So we spent a good 6 weeks marketing the properties, getting the best results, and at the end of that, we're comfortable to say that the price and the best price that we received on those properties is in all likelihood the best price that we would have been able to achieve on those properties. And the bank was satisfied that given that time, they were happy with the results, and they were happy with what was achieved. And as a matter of interest, the total sales were, in terms of what was actually achieved, we had 79 properties. We had 61 transfers that were successful. We had 14 that didn't go through due to financing, but the clients were obviously penalized in terms of their commission that were paid, and we had 4 that we had no offers on. And the net result was just over 20 million in sales. And so as you can see, as a sales to value figure, it was in the region of about 55% of our achieved sales to valuation. So that's a considerably lower figure than what one might imagine. But that's the nature of this type of auction. A lot of guys got some good deals.
So just to confirm then, just so that I understand, so you're saying, because I know the bank valuations are generally conservative as is, and Anthony has actually asked a question which we'll get on to now, but you're saying if the bank valued it conservatively at 100 Rand, generally people pick them up on average for 55 Rand?
No, that's correct, but I want to disagree with you as far as the valuations are concerned. We don't believe that the valuations were conservative at all. The way that we see it is that in a market such as this, the valuation of a property is the amount that someone is willing to offer for that property, and that's something that I think is obviously difficult for a bank to take note of. But certainly for us, there's only so much that we can do to get the best price. And often what we say is that if we market the property extensively, if we do everything we can in our power to bring out all the investors out of the woodwork, the price that we achieve is inevitably the market value of that property. So although as a percentage to valuation it seems fairly low, we definitely believe that the valuations were not necessarily in all accounts taking into consideration the current climate. But having said that, even if they were 15-20% inflated, that's still a really great deal as far as an investor would be concerned.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to establish. And tell me, Tim, I mean, I sat in that rapid auction. It was an incredible experience. I've never seen sometimes where an auction goes down and not up. But tell us, I mean, can you give us just some little indications of some of the gems that you saw come through? I mean, how much did that piece of land go for in Brackenridge and Plet, as an example? Or I don't know if you've got any other little gems that you want to tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, well, there's a few properties that come to mind, and we predominantly dealt with Gauteng properties, but there were the odd coastal property. We had a property in Picken, which was a really nice, neat 3-bedroom home in Picken, and the bank valuation was about 2 million, and the client bought it for 1.3 million, which was a great deal. There was vacant land in Picken that was valued at $1 million that went for 500,000. We had some vacant land down in the Leisure Bay area on the KZN South Coast. The bank had valued these properties at about 700,000, and we had 3 of them, and we sold them for between 180 and 200,000. There were lots of homes, apartments, and flats where people got similar deals. And I think if you look at those percentages of 55% on average, there were some good deals, but at the same time, the way that we look at it is that clients, these properties have been on the market for a while. Clients feel that they've got a good deal. The bank has avoided continuing holding costs on these properties, and I think it's a win-win situation for everyone concerned.
And just in my interest, I mean, as I said, it was a very good experience. Is it something that's going to be repeated, do you think?
I think in different forms. We've made no bones about the fact that there are a lot of things that potentially could have been done slightly better on both sides of the coin. I think a lot of clients didn't fully come to terms with the conditions or the process around it, and certainly from our side we had no reference to really work from to look at what kind of response we were going to get. This response was overwhelming, and I believe that we did a pretty good job of maintaining control over the auction. But certainly the things that the bank and Gavel and Co have discussed to improve for the future, some of those things would be to focus more strategically on specific areas rather than do bulk auction, let's say up in an area like Gauteng and market properties down at the coast. Rather go and do these sorts of more dedicated auctions in specific areas and bring out buyers that way, as well as target times of the year. The time of the year was a tricky one. A lot of the post-auction administration, including the payment of deposits and whatnot, fell over the holiday period, which proved to be a challenge for us, and the bank themselves who were responsible for that. But I think those are all minor things, and we're in the process at the moment of working on some new ideas, and I hope that the bank will go forward and take the positives out of this and come up with something else innovative. But the one thing that I do want to say in summary on that is that FNB took a huge risk, and they were very innovative. There are a lot of other financial institutions that may not have done this, and you've got to give them credit for doing that and for putting it on the line. And we're certainly quite happy with the results.
Not perfect. I mean, just to touch base on that, FNB were also the first ones to come out with quick sell, and so they really have been quite proactive in this whole process. Moving on, because it actually leads in pretty nicely, Anthony Siegel has asked a question. He says, how are the banks valuing the distressed property on their books? Are they simply trying to reduce the exposure, or are they looking for margin also?
It's actually a very good question, because it depends. The answer is really it depends. And if I look at the PIP book, I can only speak for certain banks, but there's a sometimes disconnect between valuation, the actual valuation of a property, and what the banks have to recover. And what I mean by that is that when a property gets bought back in at a sheriff's auction, the banks incur various costs. They incur VAT, they incur legal costs, commissions, etc. And obviously that means then that they have to recover those. There's also holding costs, and if the property has been on the market for a period of time, they do try and factor in these sorts of holding costs. There are certain properties that they believe in the next couple of years will achieve value for them, and those properties they still believe they have equity in them, they still believe that they can achieve a profit on them. And there are a number of properties which perhaps were overvalued in the past, during the peak times, and they're happier to get rid of. But the banks have got quite sophisticated valuation methods. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So it really does depend on the property itself. But at the end of the day, as I've said, the market will dictate, and they generally are quite open to offers. So they are happy to be influenced by what is offered to them by investors.
Perfect. Just I'm going to point out there, as I said, I have been doing presentations, and I have actually filmed that presentation. So anyone that wants more information, Tim gave a hell of a lot of advice the very first presentation we did on how the banks do valuations, how they've got a different credit department for actually lending money, and also what I think is very interesting is how they actually provide help to sellers as well to stop them going through the whole process. That's not the forum. Tonight the forum is to pick Tim's brain and to find out where the good opportunities are. But if you want to know all those things, contact me and I can help you. There's a question here, Tim, which I think is a good one from John Straub, and he said the property price really tumbled in America. A reasonable return on a property here is 1%. A 1 million house should fetch 10,000 rand per month, but at the moment this balance doesn't exist much. I believe the market has yet to tumble until an equilibrium occurs. Do you agree? Just on that, before I hand over to Tim, I just want to let you know, John, from my side, the property market actually tumbled by 40% across the whole of America. I was there last year. In places like Las Vegas, there were houses that you could buy for 320,000 for a nice 4-bedroom home in 2007, 2008 that you can now pick up when I was there last year for $80,000. I do think the one thing that I would like to point out, though, that I think I found one of the biggest lessons from sitting at that F&B auction, and there was actually a gentleman sitting next to me at the time, and he kept getting me to try and buy some of the properties because the deals sounded so good. And I kept explaining to him that I'd just come along to see Tim in action and to learn as much as I could. But I think the most important thing that I wanted to say to you was what I learned from that auction was that most of the experienced people were buying it like a commercial product. So when you buy a commercial building, the valuation of the building is based on the rental income and what one can expect. And something I found fascinating was whenever Tim knew what the rental income was on the property, then immediately that determined what the valuation was and what investors were prepared to buy for. So as a whole, I do believe, if one wanted to sit and discuss the American market and the South African market, I could sit all night and have that debate. But I think the fundamental difference between South Africa and the UK is firstly that lending was far too easy. They had what they call ninja loans, which is no income, no job, no assets. And when I was there last year, I said, how did you get a loan in America? And they said, you literally needed a heartbeat. And we all know with the NCA and everything that our banks have never been stretched and extended to that, that perspective. And the other thing that I think is fascinating in America is the massive oversupply. They reckon there's over 1 million homes where the developers built too many. There just was no demand. In places like Florida and Orlando, it's ridiculous. Same in Vegas, same in Nevada, and quite a lot in California as well. We don't have that problem here, and they've also got a thing called shadow inventory in America where anywhere between 4 million and 12 million homes is actually being held back by the banks. The banks don't want to bring them onto the market to make the problems worse. So just on that context, and sorry, Tim, for jumping in, but I am quite experienced on the comparisons between South Africa and America. I don't believe South Africa is anywhere near has the same fundamentals because at the end of the day, our banks didn't lend at the same sort of velocity, and certainly from a supply and demand issue, it's not the same case. Are we being impacted at the moment? Certainly, but I think two things just to answer your question. One is I don't think we're going to go the American route because the fundamentals are in place. And secondly, in terms of, I found it very interesting, and I don't know if you want to comment on that anymore, Tim, but in terms of the valuations and how I actually noticed how residential property was being purchased on the same basis that commercial property gets purchased.
Yeah, Scott, the only thing that I would like to say there is that it's not something that I think you can throw a blanket over. I believe that when it comes to property investment, when it comes to valuation, one has to look quite carefully at the areas and the type of investment that one's looking at. There's been a lot said about certain coastal pockets around South Africa that, as you said, much like in the States, there was just a sudden huge oversupply in product, and that's why you'll find that places like Jeffreys Bay and some of the resort towns up the west coast and the Cape, certainly down the south coast and KZN, some of these areas have been impacted, and these areas were, for the most part, considerably overvalued at a time when the banks were lending, not as recklessly, but certainly lending considerable amounts. And it's these guys that you tend to find are having the problems now. And that can be seen by the trends. If you look at the properties that are on the market, it's a lot of second homes, it's a lot of investment homes, a lot of speculators, and it's generally those holiday coastal areas that has been affected.
No, perfect. And something else that I wanted to point out, which I noticed when I sat in that auction, was also, and it makes sense to me why the banks are so scared to lend against land. Generally, if you're buying land now, you've got loan to values of 50, maybe 60% tops. And it was interesting watching, it's the land that they struggle with most. I mean, if you were to give me a number, and I'm not sure if you know that number, but I'm sure that the loan to values or the ratios of market value were probably lower for land than they were for existing properties.
It's an interesting one, Scott, because if I in the coastal properties, yes, considerably, we had a percentage of value of down to 20%, between 20 and 40% on the coastal properties, and yet in some of the Gauteng vacant properties, we managed to achieve quite close to valuation, or certainly at an acceptable rate. So it says to me that there still is a demand, to an extent, but I mean, as far as the stats go, they don't lie, and those coastal vacant land, they were struggling to really get any result. It may have been as a result of the fact that we were marketing these properties up in Gauteng at that auction. It may have impacted on that slightly, but having said that, we did do on-site auctions at some of these estates, and the results weren't any better.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. It's a question I get asked all the time. If I'm getting started, I'm in property, but I don't, but I want to get started. I'm interested in this process. What do I do next, basically?
For me, it's really simple. If you're going to get involved in the auction process, you have to make sure that you have finance in place, and that's just to ensure that you can take advantage of the good offers when they come your way. Because for people to understand the auction process, they need to know that when they bid at an auction, there is generally a 10% or sometimes 20, 30,000 rand deposit, which needs to be accompanied with the offer, and as well as proof of funds or a bond grant, at that point. So these sales are unconditional, and that makes them different to that of a normal estate agent sale. So my number one tip is to be prepared. And there's a lot of people that for example, that we encounter during this big auction, and we encounter it every day around the country, that don't understand that process. So they need to differentiate the two. But if you've got that, if you know what you can afford, if you've got your finance in place, if you've got the cash to pay the deposit and the commissions, then you're in a good position to get started. And that's what I would do upfront. So know what you can spend, and that would be a good start.
So okay. I mean, this now moves on to even I presume the more experienced. I've got my money, I've got my deposit, I've got my pre-approval in place, and just to kick in there a bit of advice. It's a tip for those people that are out there. When you want to get pre-approved, if you walk into the local FNB or ABSA or Nedbank and say, I want a pre-approval, they'll probably look at you and laugh and say, we don't do pre-approvals, because it's not what the standard bank does. And tell me if I'm wrong, Tim, but that's certainly my experience. If you want to get pre-approved, contact us and we can put you in the right channels, because what the banks have done is they've set up special pre-approval centers to aid this process, if I'm right, or certainly in my experience.
Yeah, they do, and there's different forms of approval. I mean, what most of the banks would do is to do a very basic credit check on you, and certainly that goes a long way in proving that the funds will be in place. But generally, in the terms of the auction, and it varies from auctioneer to auctioneer, they will give you, up to sort of 14 to 21 days within which to actually provide, the finance or the actual bond grants itself. So it's just a case of being confident and having confidence in yourself that you've got the funds. But yeah, there are avenues, there are opportunities to get that done.
Yeah. So I mean, look, as I said, contact us and we can put you in the right direction. But okay, so we've got all that in place now. So what do I do next, basically?
There's probably for me one of the biggest bits of advice that I can give someone that's looking to get involved in this particular avenue is not to speculate, but to invest rather. And as I'm a golfer, and as I would say in golf, play it as it lies, and don't make decisions based on what you hope the future is going to bring. But invest in what you actually see in front of you. Invest in what is happening currently. That might be a conservative approach, but I don't believe that this is the time to be overly aggressive if one is just getting into the market. So always do your homework on a property, and make sure that you're working with reputable auctioneers. Another bit of advice that I always give to our clients is to be patient. There's no need to rush into this sort of investment. There are deals that are coming up all the time, and as long as you know what you're looking for, and as long as you've done your homework, you can be patient, and you will find something that's going to work for you. Don't be afraid to ask questions. The more questions, the better, particularly when it comes to investing in this sort of thing. And there are a lot of guys that try and get involved and try and go around or circumvent auctioneers and go and buy properties at the sheriff's auction. There's just so many problems associated with that, and with all the allegations of collusion and at those auctions, also with all the hidden costs, all the outstanding rates and taxes and levies and things like that, they can become a problem. And there's been many times in the past where we've seen clients being burnt by not doing their homework as far as that. So working through an auctioneer, you have the right to ask those questions. Yes, there are such things as footsteps, which will obviously be reconsidered with the new Consumer Protection Act. But ask questions. If you ask a question, there's no reason why you shouldn't get a straight answer. And those are some tips from our side.
Just a quick one here. Mike Shrewsbury, you've raised your hand. If you could please send through the question, if you could write it out to me, and I'll be able to read it out. So if you could please send that through. Anthony Siegel has said here, what are the costs in addition to the purchase price? Transfer fees, transfer duty, auctioneer's commission, stamp duty, and PRP is a buyer liable for outstanding property rates and taxes and levies. Now, just before you tuck in there, Tim, as I said, we have got an entire course on this, Anthony, and I do have a recording, and I can send it to you along with that Word document, because for over an hour, we've actually explained each and every step of the process and the pros and the cons, because it can be quite integral, and it's very important to understand the different parts of the process and what the pros and cons are. But if you wouldn't mind, Tim, just giving a quick overview as to the way you see it in terms of the different processes.
I'm happy to do that. But what I want to just highlight quickly is, because I can imagine that there'd be a lot of people that are trying to figure out, where the properties lie in the process. But what will happen is that when there is a distressed property, that'll be a client that is potentially in arrears with the bank, their arrears and their bond payments. And inevitably what happens is that the bank will approach them to go onto this quick sell or assist or whatever program that they've got to assist. A mandate will then be issued once they've signed a mandate with the bank. An estate agency or an auction house will be issued with a 30, 60, 90-day mandate to try and market that property, and the bank provides certain benefits within that period. If the property doesn't sell within that period, it then moves towards closer towards a sheriff's auction. That's often where we get involved as a last resort. But during that period, the property is still sold as a normal property. There are still transfer duties incurred. There are still transfer costs, legal costs, registration fees. Generally, if you buy it through the auction process, the auction commission is 10%, generally 10% plus VAT on the purchase price. And generally, with an auctioneer, it's paid by the purchaser, because particularly in the distressed side of things, because obviously the clients, because they're in a form of distress, they're going to struggle to pay that. So generally, our purchaser pays the commission 10%. Once it becomes a PRP, so let's say at the sheriff's auction it gets bought in by the bank, what will happen is they pay VAT on the properties. So thereafter, there aren't transfer duties on the properties. So there will be legal registration costs, but there aren't transfer duties, and as that is already included in that. But however, there will still be an auctioneer's commission over and above that. So post sheriff auction as a PRP, no transfer duties. Prior to it, as with the normal sale.
And guys, while Tim's been talking, I tried to give you a bit of advice there. As I said, it's pretty much a 5-step process, and I've put up that Word document. Tim, you've seen it before, just while you were talking. So, basically, you've got the different steps there, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, which is the sheriff's auction, and then stage 5, which is the PRPs. And the two ones in yellow are really what Tim was talking about, very much where they get involved, and where the auctioneers tend to get involved. So hopefully that helps a little bit just in terms of that. Thanks for that, Tim. Okay, now let's look on here. Where do you see the market going? I mean, in terms of the next 2 or 3 years, what's your gut feel? I know we sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, but what's your opinion? And as an investor, I mean, you've already given us a lot of advice that we mustn't be worried about where it is in 3 years' time. We must play it as it lies, as you just said from a golfing analogy.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously have to remain positive. I'm generally an optimistic person, certainly even in my own investment activities. But I think, like I have said before, I don't think that the market is going to turn around in the immediate short term. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing for people in the property investment game. But it does mean that when you do make an investment, you need to think carefully about what that investment is going to do for you. You need to look at the rental incomes that one can generate, and you've got to make that investment work for you. There's no point in investing in a property that you believe you're going to be getting rental income in 12 months' time. You need to invest in a property where there is an existing rental income, and that obviously is something that I would do. There are still challenges. The domestic debt to disposable income remains very high, and that's obviously restricted on the growth that we'll see in the household and property sector. So there's a lot of things to consider. I think that time will tell. I don't have a crystal ball, and I think people have learned lessons from the past about speculating too much. So I think as I say, I'm positive. I think if you've got cash, if you've got the funds to invest and you're patient, I think you'll be able to pick up some very good deals. But don't expect to receive returns in the short term.
Yeah, I think just to add to your thing there, Tim, I mean, certainly from my side, I agree with you. At the end of the day, there's no point in not being positive. But short term, I do think we as a property investor, there's two sides to the coin, and neither of them are really good, because should the economy start to really improve and have growth, and I was actually driving down William Nicol yesterday, and there was a bit of talk about inflation. Now, where there's smoke, there's fire. And if we're starting to have inflationary pressures with oil and a weakening rand, then interest rates are going to go up, which, as we well know, will curtail any property market, has done ever since the beginning of property. Should that not happen, well, that means the economy is not in a strong position, and therefore, you're not going to see property growth. So I think, really, for me, going back to your golfing analogy and playing the ball as it lies, I do believe, though, 5, 6, 7 years from now, we'll look back at this as one of the greatest opportunities, certainly of a generation, possibly of a lifetime. And that's where one needs to focus on the individual property and the opportunity of that property, and to do all the numbers. And I mean, we've got different courses on literally how to evaluate a property, all the different software to decide which ones are good, which ones aren't. But the long story short, if you take the responsibility and you make good investments now, I honestly believe 5, 6, 7 years from now, you'll be looking back with a smile on your face. And the last caveat I'd like to mention there is the biggest lesson I've learned for the last 2 years is that anyone that focuses on capital growth, capital appreciation, has really found themselves wanting over the last 2 years. And that's down to the individual property investor right through to some of the biggest property funds globally. Those people that are focused on income and yield are actually in even a stronger position now over the last 2 years. And it's those guys that focused on that strategy that have tended to buy up some of the best assets from the capital growth people that fell, And there are two sayings that I love there. And the one is that even turkeys can fly in a hurricane, which is that whole thing that, even in a good market, all properties look good and all property people look good. But and the other one is that when the tide goes out, you find out who's standing with their pants down. And I think really that's what we've learned over the last 2 years. And just tying those two analogies together and coming back to what you said of playing the golf ball as it lies. I'm a big believer that when it comes to the market, you can only ever call the bottom of the market in hindsight. And so you mustn't get too caught up into, is the market going up, is the market going down? You need to actually evaluate every opportunity on merit, as you've rightly said. And, I think it's very important for those people out there. You don't want to get analysis paralysis and look back a couple of years from now and realize you missed out on a great opportunity.
I couldn't agree more, Scott.
Last question for the evening from my side, and I don't know if you've got one, but I'm sure you do with your experience, knowing you pretty well. What would be your major tip for 2011? What would you be helping people with if you could give them one tip?
I've touched on it a couple of times, but my tip is to be patient, and that's something that I think that if you can if you keep your eyes open and you are prepared and you are patient, you will get a good deal. The good deals are out there, and there's no point in rushing into it. There was a time, if I can just elaborate, where there was just there would just be frenzies. There would be these buying frenzies in new estates, new developments, new section title developments, and there was just you could sell out a development in a weekend, and those days are very long gone. And so I think the whole mentality behind this needs to be just a little bit more of good things come to those who wait. But I don't think anyone should make a property investment by going and making a purchase on the first property that they've looked at. I think one needs to really look at the market, do your homework, and you'll pick up some deals. But as far as the type of property, I would keep my eye on those properties that I referred to before, which are going on the market just prior to that sheriff auction. It's a time where in a period in which the clients are trying to avoid that sheriff auction, because if they go there, they get a 30-year judgment. They cannot negotiate on any shortfalls, and it's a pretty helpless situation to have your property go to a sheriff's auction. And certainly there's no real effort to market those properties effectively, so the prices that you achieve there aren't very good. And at the same token, the banks don't want to go to that process. They don't want to incur the additional costs. They don't want to keep the properties. Banks do not want to repossess properties. A lot of people that have had their properties repossessed might believe that, but it's certainly not something that they like to do. It's not something that they actually mandated to go out and achieve. So they're in a lot likely to actually accept prices that are a bit lower, and the banks are happy to negotiate. They're happy to negotiate with their bondholders, and they're happy to write off debt at that point. So for me, the best deals on the market will come just before that period, and that's something that you just need to keep an eye out for, and that's obviously something that we focus on very, very, very specifically.
No, that's a great answer. Thank you very much. John, I don't know if you know John Straub. He says no pressure on that last comment, Tim, but I think you answered that very well, so thank you very much for that. Guys, we are drawing to a close. The intention is always to keep these to an hour, so if anyone's got any other questions, please fire them through. I'm literally watching the screen and reading. Just while I am waiting for those questions to come through, I'm just going to go on to the next slide. On this slide, there's a whole lot of contact details. You've got IPS Invest main website, the .com one. That's got all our global property, focusing on South Africa, Australia, and the UK. And then we've got ipsinvestproperties.co.za. That's our special website that we actually spread up specifically for the auction properties, where we tie in and work directly with Gavel & Co. and some of the best properties that are available. You've got our contact details there in terms of our phone number. The blog, I put up all the latest research. A lot of the stuff I spoke about tonight and a lot more is up there. Twitter, a lot of people always ask, am I going to find out what I had for breakfast this morning? It's not about that. It's just letting you know what is actually happening. And then YouTube, I do a lot of videos around and keep people updated. Just while we're waiting for some videos to come, some questions to come through, I do want to mention that we have done a number of courses, and should you be interested, please get hold of us. We have taken through the entire process, shown how you can evaluate a property, shown how you can use Lightstone reports, and most importantly, we can show you and teach you how to work with the likes of Tim and Gavel & Co. to really make sure that you're getting the right information and you can make those educated and informed decisions. So please get hold of us and let us know. And because at the end of the day, Tim and I work together, and we're looking to try and get you the best opportunities where you understand the market and we suit your requirements. There's a question that's come through here from Mark. He says, in future, do it at 8. I just joined it now as I have no chance at 5. Kids' bedtime. Mark, thanks for the question. It's a very tricky one, and we will actually be running a survey. I did run a survey with a big group of people and found that 7 o'clock was the best time, but I do appreciate what you're saying. I know a couple of people that in the UK also struggle, because they're 2 hours behind. So thank you very much for that comment. Brad, please can you send me the reports you were speaking about? That's perfect, Brad. I'm actually going to help you out. Let me just do something here quickly. I'm going to put up my email just so that you can, so it's Scott, sorry, I didn't actually sort this out in the beginning. Now, just as a matter of interest, Tim's got a whole number of market reports that he was talking about, and I know, Tim, you've been talking about stuff tonight, but if you want to send me an email through, I will actually get those details from Tim and be able to email those reports and even that video that we did, etc., etc. So send me an email at scott@ipsinvest.com. So that's scott@ipsinvest.com, and I will be able to send you a lot more information. Mark has got a reply or recorded so we can listen to it anytime. Mark, we have done that. We've recorded both the video version and the audio version. So if you want to watch it on your laptop or you want to put it on your iPod while you're going for a run or driving your car, we have done that. Tim, just from your side, we are sort of coming to a close here, and I'm sort of waiting for a few more questions to come through. Anything else from your side that you think is important, basically?
I would say that I think keep your eyes out in the next couple of months. There's going to be some shake-ups around the sheriff auction process. There's been a lot of investigation into this whole process. A lot of work that's been put in by the banks and the South African Institute for Auctioneers. So it'll be interesting times to see what happens over the course of the next sort of 6 to 12 months. I think also just be wary of there's a lot of mom and pop stores, auctioneers out there. So I suggest that just do your homework and before you sort of get involved in with these sorts of guys. But really that's about it.
Just to add to what Tim said, I've been in the property game a long time, and at the end of the day, those people that make money in property have two things: they have the right information and the right partners. And the best of breed partners and people that know what they're doing and have got the experience are invaluable. And on that note, Tim, I'd like to thank you very much for your time tonight. There are a lot of people online, and the insight and the value that you've given us in the last hour is really, really appreciated, because as I said right in the beginning, this can be quite a murky area. There's a whole lot of PRPs and SIEs and sheriff auctions that are completely untransparent. And I think you told me the story about the guy in Belita that bought a house on sheriff's auction and found out it didn't have a roof, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we've all heard the stories about our mates that have bought houses and had to pay huge rates and taxes and all that sort of dramatic things. So I really appreciate your time tonight. It really is great, and on behalf of everyone out there, thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. I mean, just to end off from our side, I just want to encourage people to ask questions and to explore this as an avenue to invest. Probably one of our biggest goals over the next couple of years is to, as you say, shed light on what has potentially traditionally been a murky area. It's a great way to invest. It's a very exciting way to invest. My advice is to go out and go and find a reputable auctioneer, go and visit a couple of auctions, go and see what it's about. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, and that's something that we really are hoping to change the attitude of people towards it. It's happening slowly but surely, but give it a chance. It's a fantastic way to go about doing it. But thanks very much, and obviously if there's any other questions that people have going forward, you can contact me through Scott, and we look forward to being in touch.
Cool, man. Well, Tim, thanks so much. And just to reiterate what you said there as well, I think the most important thing, people, is to be prepared and to do the work up front and to certainly do the research, and don't go along to your first auction and get excited and think it's a candy store, because you don't know what you're going to get. But, thanks for tonight, because I think it's all about that research and that understanding. So without further ado, I don't have any questions coming through. We're hitting 8 o'clock on the nose. I think we've answered a lot tonight. So thanks so much, Tim. I'm going to close off the webinar. And for all of those of you that are online tonight, really appreciate it. Great having you online. And get all of us. Both of us can help. And certainly the rest of my team, Stuart and Brad and Adele, et cetera, will be able to help as well and put you in contact. So thanks very much. Have a great evening, and we'll speak to you soon. Just going to...